Hi everyone, thanks for joining me again this week on my channel titled Literacy in Elementary Schools, Improving How Students Read, Write, and Communicate. Last week, if you remember, we spoke a little bit about literacy and what that term really encompasses. I spoke about the fact that literacy is more than just reading. It's speaking, it's presenting, it's discussing, it's it's basically anything that has to do with communicating. And so even though I'm looking at reading today, reading is only a subset of literacy, and it is probably the most common term people associate with literacy. So I figured this might be a good place to start so we can start on some common ground. Okay, I am Avia Kelly, and thanks for joining me today. So, what is reading? Reading is basically the simple act of being able to derive meaning from print. And print could be a billboard, a tablet, a book, a restaurant sign, anything that has symbols that have meaning in your language or language that you're fluent in. Okay? That's kind of my very broad definition, making meaning from print or deriving meaning from print. Now, historically, we have taught reading in a few ways. For example, when I was a kid, I learned the bottom up model. And in this model, this is where you learned your ABCs, your letter sounds, your blends, and you were practicing tracing those letters. You're saying it, you're writing it, you're having multiple experiences. And that's a very good approach. And quite frankly, it is not it doesn't stand alone, but it's definitely a good way to start. I mean, I turned out okay. Now, we have a different model that is called the top-down approach. And this is more your whole language. They look at what the reader brings to the print. For example, context really matters. And so this model focuses a little bit less on decoding words and phonemic awareness or learning your letters, but it takes into consideration knowing words, memorizing words, and learning in context. Now, this isn't a bad one, for example. However, the latest model that goes till now, it uses both. And I think that creates a happy balance. You're not only learning your phonics constantly and words and learning how to decode words at various levels in your classrooms, but you're also learning to use context and bring meaning to the text because those things do matter. Now, some questions to consider is how does reading look in your class? How's your reading instruction? Are there opportunities for phonics instruction? And especially up into the third grade, this is very key. Okay. However, we also want to shift a little bit so students can understand that context matters because sometimes one of the things you ask is, does it make sense? Now, sometimes the kid just doesn't know the word, and that question doesn't really help. But if you can find that happy balance in your classroom where kids are getting, for example, a shared reading experience, and then you're going back to the words, or you're doing the words even before that, part to whole, then you can have a more effective reading instruction. And maybe next time I'll talk a little bit more about effective reading instruction practices.